Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt that deep, agonizing ache in your chest, the kind that flares up from the terrifying thought of losing someone you love, I want you to know right off the bat that your pain is incredibly common and it's absolutely valid. Honestly, so many of us have been there, completely stuck in that specific kind of emotional quicksand. Well, today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating psychological concept drawn from ancient Stoic philosophy. We're going to unpack how the source material guides us to break free from exhausting emotional dependency, uncover something called the mirror effect, and ultimately discover a path toward unshakable self-worth. It's a genuinely transformative framework, and I am so excited to dive into this with you. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you lost yourself trying to keep someone else? It's a heavy, intensely difficult thing to ask yourself, isn't it? Think about that creeping, agonizing fear of losing a partner. Early on, in that honeymoon phase, everything just feels perfect and completely effortless. But slowly, sometimes without us even realizing it, that trust morphs. It twists into this paranoid fear that they might slip away. Psychologically, that fear triggers a constant, low-grade fight-or-flight response that literally eats away at your peace. And before you know it, you're bending over backwards, crushing your own boundaries, and changing who you are just to keep them around. You essentially erase your own identity to become whatever you think they need. And there are some very clear, undeniably painful signs that you've surrendered your emotional power. Let's really look at these. Are you analyzing their every single story and social media post for hidden meanings? Always wondering, wait, was that post meant for me? Or maybe your entire mood for the day depends entirely on whether they reply to your text. Here's a fascinating and honestly somewhat terrifying fact from modern psychology. Constantly checking your phone for a message literally hijacks your brain's reward system. It creates this toxic dopamine and anxiety loop. If they say hi, boom, dopamine hit, your day is made. If they go quiet for a few hours, you crash into withdrawal and total panic. Add in constantly apologizing and taking the blame just to keep the peace, and it's a glaring sign that your power is just no longer yours. To really understand why this happens, we have to look at the stark difference between true love and attachment. Think of it like this. True love adds real value to your life. It brings peace, it helps you bloom, and it feels secure without you needing minute-by-minute validation. Attachment, that binds you in chains. It breeds fear, it relies completely on their reactions, and leaves you feeling fundamentally incomplete without them. It's like having an empty cup that you are demanding they fill. When your value rests entirely in someone else's eyes, fear naturally takes root. You start operating from this place of deep insecurity instead of expansive affection. Basically, love frees you, but attachment traps you in a cycle of constantly trying to earn your own worth. When your peace depends on someone else's reaction, you hand over the keys to your soul. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. This is an incredibly heavy realization. Making someone else the sole source of your happiness is the ultimate emotional trap. By handing over those keys, you're volunteering to be a passenger in your own life. When they're warm and attentive, you're thrilled. But when they inevitably pull back, your whole world violently goes dark. You're letting your baseline emotional state be completely controlled by someone else's fleeting moods. It's exhausting. It's totally unsustainable. And frankly, it is deeply unfair to you. This brings us to a major psychological turning point. Ask yourself, how do you take your power back when you're just completely exhausted from crying? Exhausted from explaining yourself and from holding on to a hope that just drains you empty? You obviously can't just snap your fingers and stop caring, but there comes a moment where you just get profoundly physically tired of being afraid. And that exhaustion, it's not a sign of weakness. That deep fatigue is actually your mind's wake-up call. It's your inner self loudly demanding that something fundamental has to change right now. So, the crucial point is how we utilize silence. We need to completely reframe how we view it. In relationships, we often think that not speaking means we've given up or that we've lost the argument. But silence isn't a sign of defeat or weakness at all. It is the conscious boundary you draw when you finally decide to stop seeking validation and start living for yourself. This isn't about ignoring someone to punish them. It's stepping into a place of immense, quiet power and self-preservation. You're actively choosing your own internal peace over the deafening noise of chasing them. You're finally stepping off the roller coaster. But how does this philosophy actually look in our daily lives? Action is where the healing starts. Step 1. Stop sending those massive paragraph texts. Stop trying to explain your feelings to someone who clearly isn't listening. The chasing ends today. Step 2. Build your own morning routine. Sit with your coffee and your peace. Instead of immediately checking your phone and waiting for their text to validate you, take charge and create your own joy. And step 3. Lose yourself in books, your work, and your personal dreams. By taking back your mornings and your nights, you actively rewire your brain, breaking that deep habit of dependency and replacing it with real self-reliance.
The sources highlight something fascinating here. When you start doing this, people, especially your ex-partner, might claim that you're suddenly acting entirely different. But here's the truth. You didn't change. You simply became the calm, strong person you always were. I really want to reassure you of this because it's vital. This new, detached, silent version of yourself is not a fake persona. You aren't putting on a mask to play some calculated game. Quite the opposite. This is your true, authentic, balanced self finally returning to the surface after being buried under months or maybe even years of crushing anxiety.
Now, this is where the psychology gets absolutely fascinating. What actually happens inside the other person's mind when you finally step back? Think about it. When the chasing stops and you're no longer constantly available at their beck and call, it creates a massive void. We usually focus so much on our own pain that we forget to analyze the shifting dynamic. What does the person who took you for granted actually experience when you simply vanish into silence? Psychologists and behavioral experts refer to this as the mirror effect. It's an incredible psychological shift where your sudden emotional detachment causes the other person to experience the exact same anxiety and fear of loss that you once felt. For so long, they held all the cards because you were pouring all your energy into them. But when your energy becomes centered on yourself instead of them, it subconsciously disrupts their entire reality. They were perfectly used to your constant presence and unwavering attention. Now that emotional supply is gone, and their brain has to process the shock. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic flip taking place here. Think about your past. You were the anxious one, always available, desperately waiting for their text, terrified of losing the connection. You were doing all the heavy lifting. But look at their present. They are deeply confused by your sudden silence. They're feeling the massive void you left behind, and suddenly they're questioning their own value. The roles have completely reversed. The person who took you for granted is now feeling the exact same sinking panic that used to keep you awake, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Let's explore exactly how this mirror effect controls them, because the psychological weight is heavy. They're watching your social media stories religiously, but letting their fragile ego prevent them from actually reaching out. They're sitting there, rereading old chats, obsessively checking to see if you're online. They're slowly realizing that your silence isn't a tantrum. It is profound, unshakable self-respect. And they're feeling intense anxiety because your absolute peace highlights the massive loss they've experienced. By simply pulling back your energy, your total lack of reaction becomes the very thing that fractures their ego. It is deeply ironic. Your silence is now their fear. Your self-respect is now their anxiety. The very person who arrogantly thought you could never live without them is now struggling every single day to figure out how to live without your constant validation. It's a profound shift in power. While you're sipping your morning coffee and reading a book, healing and moving forward, your quiet, dignified strength is echoing incredibly loudly in their mind. You've become an unstoppable force simply by choosing not to move at all. But here is the catch. We have to pause right here and ask ourselves a critical question. Is the ultimate goal simply to make them regret losing you? Is this entire process just about getting revenge, flipping the script, or making them feel incredibly guilty? It is so tempting to stop there and relish the power. But if our only goal is revenge, we've missed the most profound, life-changing lesson of this entire philosophical journey. We'd still be letting them dictate our motives. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it brings us to a concept deeply rooted in ancient philosophy known as a Stoic victory. Great Stoic thinkers, like Marcus Aurelius, understood that true success isn't about manipulating someone into apologizing or waiting for them to crawl back. A Stoic victory is focusing solely on what is entirely within your control, your own reactions, your internal peace, and your unshakable self-worth. It is about internal self-mastery. It requires completely letting go of things outside your control, like someone else's feelings, their regrets, or their eventual realization of your worth. Because true victory is realizing you no longer need them to be whole. The ultimate win actually happens when you simply stop caring if they're feeling the mirror effect at all. It happens when you organically forget to check if they're watching your stories. It happens when you stop waiting for an apology that may never come, and you realize that your happiness, your freedom, and your peace are entirely your own choice. You discover that your peace is yours to keep forever, and it absolutely does not depend on anyone else's presence in your life. You haven't lost anyone. You have finally found yourself. Think about the incredible journey you've just walked through. Every single tear, every agonizing sleepless night, every moment of painful, deafening silence, it didn't break you, it built you. The struggle was the forge. You journeyed from a place of desperate, exhausting emotional dependency to a place of complete, beautiful, resilient self-sufficiency. You weathered the storm and emerged realizing that the person you were desperately searching for all along was actually you. So, I'll leave you with this. Will you continue to chase someone else's fleeting validation, or will you choose yourself today? The choice is entirely in your hands, and honestly, it always has been. The power was never theirs to take. It was only ever yours to give. If you are finally ready to choose yourself and prioritize your own peace and self-respect above all else, join this community by subscribing. We're going to keep exploring fascinating concepts and building our strength together. The choice is yours.